The first of the poems that we are going to look at in these short revision videos is A Poison Tree by William Blake in 1794. You will need to talk about context, but unlike with Macbeth and Lord of the Flies, this needs to be short. You don't need to have huge amounts in there. So 3 things that you could talk about in terms of A Poison Tree. It was written in 1794 as part of Blake's Songs of Innocent Experience collection. All of the poems deal with the harsh realities of the 18th century and early 19th century, especially the religious unrest and the impact of the Industrial Revolution. The poem itself reflects ideas from Genesis and the Bible, which is the Garden of Eden and the story of Adam and Eve and how temptation can bring about man's downfall. You will have your annotated copies from the work that you've done in class. If you haven't, then you can pause me now and have a quick look at some of the annotations that I made as we were going through the poem together. I shall read it quickly and then look at how we can talk about this in the exam. So, A Poison Tree. I was angry with my friend, I told my wrath did end. I was angry with my foe, I told it not, my wrath did grow. And I watered it in fears, night and morning with my tears, and I sunned it with smiles and with soft deceitful wiles, and it grew both day and night, till it bore an apple bright, and my foe beheld it shine, and he knew that it was mine. And into my garden stole, when the night had veiled the pole, in the morning glad I see my foe outstretched beneath the tree. So a nice short poem, some lovely rhyme and meter in there. What can you say in the exam? So in terms of how Blake opens the poem, he immediately establishes the theme of anger using a combination of iambic and trochaic tetrameter in order to make sure that the words that jump out are those abstract nouns anger and wrath. So he's introducing quite a frightening tone at the beginning, talking about how this anger and wrath can grow inside of you. As the poem develops, he employs the extended metaphor of this anger as a tree, as a seed that is going to be growing. It's been planted, and then he waters it with his fears and sunned it with smiles. So he's contributing to these growing feelings. So rather than trying to deal with these emotions, he lets it fester inside him. The poem's uneasy tone is amplified through the rhyming couplets, with the strong emotions of the speaker shown to be growing until it produces an apple. This metaphor itself reflects the biblical story of the Garden of Eden and is aiming to illustrate the destructive nature of temptation and foreshadows the downfall of his foe in the later stanzas. As the poem concludes, the speaker's sinister malevolence is revealed. We shift from this focus on his anger being sort of nurtured and that wrath growing to the result of it. So what has happened because of this and because he hasn't dealt with his anger. And he's glad to see his foe dead beneath the tree in the garden. So perhaps here Blake is suggesting that the absence of regret shows how anger diminishes an individual's humanity and illustrates the cruel and selfish nature of 18th century England. It's a lovely poem. It goes really well with some of the other poems and is quite easy to remember. The poems we looked at when we studied this for the first time and we thought about how they could connect. Poison Tree goes really well with The Man He Killed, looking at the relationship between 2 people and the feelings about killing someone. Cousin Kate, again, the relationship between 2 people, strong feelings, anger, jealousy, changing feelings, and that delight at the end of the poem that both end with. We've got Prelude in terms of those sort of strong, overwhelming feelings, how these emotions can sit with you. There's natural imagery and the power of nature. Catherine, the strong feelings between 2 people and anger, particularly from the child, about not being allowed to stay out. And finally, what were they like? So in terms of 2 different paths, one which is destructive and one looking at what could have been. So a nice poem, one that you could easily talk about in the exam, lots of things in there, lots of techniques to draw on, and thinking very carefully about your context and about making those links with a second poem.